Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another episode of What's in a Performance, the series where I take performances and videos and analyze them and explain what's going on behind the scenes, what the pianists that we all know and love are doing. Today, we're going to be taking a look at ANIMENZ'S Bluebird. I think he put this video out in 2015 when he was still in conservatory, and so it'll be interesting to compare what he does in this versus what he's been doing recently. And I'll give some thoughts on what I hear. Probably nothing too concrete in terms of like arranging itself because I'm only looking at one score, I'm only looking at Bluebird, but it'll be like things that I noticed like off the cuff, right, to my ear. Personally, I did not grow up watching Naruto, but I have listened to this song a whole lot. ANIMENZ'S arrangement is of course fantastic as usual. But with all that being said, let's get to the video. All right, we're ready for some old ANIMENZ. What is this, 5 years ago? He does say that this is one of his easier arrangements, at least at the time. That's interesting. Immediate difference that I hear from his more recent stuff, which I've been listening to more of. The voicing is present in his new things, but it's more subtle. The difference in layers is much smaller, whereas here you hear a much more distinct gradient between the two. Ooh, that like the way that he lifts right there. It's like a down-up motion for slurs, right? Is when you drop the wrist, right, to play the first note of the slur, or just first portion of a slur with a weight, right? And then you lift in order to play with more lightness, right? Because you're rotating about the knuckle here. So when he lifts like this, he does the dual thing where it's both this lift from the wrist to make it lighter, but it's also almost like a lift from the wrist in order to give it a little bit of articulation, like from a staccato. Back up slightly. Right, you still hear that gradient? But the way he's phrasing is very ANIMENZ'S like, right? There's no like real sweep along the phrase like da 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 bum, right? Rather, it's much more like straightforward, which is a very ANIMENZ'S way of phrasing. What's also interesting is that instead of writing this as a trill, he has them measured as 16th notes. So technically with a trill, you're still playing like 16ths, 32nds, 64ths, or whatever, depending on time signature. Writing out the 16ths has a slightly different implication. It means that you want a specific connectedness on those notes to come out in the way that it's played. So we listen again. Of course, this left-hand rhythm is very ANIMENZ'S. Like the jump bum, bum, right? It's like da 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 da. Ooh, very nice, very soft. Ooh, look how close his fingers are sticking to the keys. And yet, they're sticking very close to the keys, but they're not connecting in a way that you expect if you were to do that. The way that ANIMENZ is playing it is he still lifts. What does this do for the tonality? What does this do for the way that the melody is phrased? One, again, he's drawing less of a string, a long line, and he's drawing more concise blocks. But two, he's also now giving each note a certain articulation, a certain emphasis, right? That can only come from like this slight lift. And so you hear the textural difference, right? Here, first verse, right? Kind of a little bit bounce, big bounce there, and then connected there, right? Still disconnected, right? Da 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 bum, da 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 dum, da 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 dum. It's the textural contrast from one phrase to the next, which makes this very interesting and prevents the ear from growing bored of hearing what's going on, right? Interesting. He's jumping to the fourth, right? So jumping to the fourth here makes it a little bit easier to slide down to 1-5 on the B. It's easier to get to the C sharp to make this jump. And this applies for longer jumps too. Because, actually this is an interesting thing that I've heard. When you try to go somewhere, lead somewhere with your hand, you don't point your pinky. You don't point your forefinger, you point your index. And so when you go 1-4, you turn your hand in such a way that it points your index in the direction that you're going towards, and it helps you find that key easier. Ooh, there's the weight, right? Like now, when he jumped the octave, he started adding a little bit more weight into it. Whereas in the lower octave, it was a little bit more measured, a little bit more controlled. And again, still more measured control. Oh, yes. Interesting, right? So the entire chorus is played almost like a mezzo forte, right? In comparison to everything else. Even the left hand is like a mezzo forte tops. But you get to the end of the chorus, all of a sudden everything is much heavier. Everything is much louder. Everything is much more staccato. And so it's like this concept, right? That you cannot reveal your hand too early when it comes to the full range of your dynamics, no matter what you're playing. It's very helpful frequently to mark out throughout the entirety of a piece how loud you're going to get and how quiet you're going to get, the extremes. And then working the gradient in between the two of those. You have to make it in such a way that your loudest loud actually sounds like a loudest loud, and your softest soft, right, has to sound that quiet, right? Because if you put like something that's like your second loudest and it's like up here, right, next to your loudest, it's not that much of a difference. But if you keep your second loudest down here and your loudest is suddenly up here, then you hear a lot more. So even though the chorus is stronger, a lot stronger than the verse, ANIMENZ'S doesn't show his hand too early, and we get the loudest loud that comes after, right? So that he still has space to grow. He still has room to breathe. There it is, right? And because it drops into the middle octave, he can afford to be a little bit more connected, right? And it still sounds like at the same energy because it's lower, even though he's not playing as loud. Ooh. That's fascinating. You hear almost like a conversation, right? It's not quite two voices, right, having a conversation. Because when you have two voices having a conversation, they move in contrary motion. It sounds like one phrase is finished and then the next phrase begins, but rather just one phrase being carried between what feels like different octaves or therefore different voices. And so it creates a very interesting texture. So even though the dynamic doesn't change, the fact that he changes octave changes the energy level. And this is a function of the arrangement and not a function of the technical application of his playing right here. Of course, going up the octave, very standard. Interesting. These are very measured arpeggios, right? You can feel like him counting this out, and maybe that's a product of playing lots of Beethoven and some Bach in conservatory because you have to count those out. And the left hand, of course, is doing very standard things. That's a nice run. And you see again the ba-bum. Same comments as the first chorus, right? And you hear ba-da-da-dum, bum-bum, slight drop, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, right? Each one of these octaves, each one of these notes carrying the melody or phrase. It's not just ba-ba-bum, ba-ba-bum. It does tend that way because he's articulating that way, but inherently it's still phrase. Da-da-da, ba-da-da. Again, of course, that's a function of arm weight and how much you're lifting. Ooh, that rotation. Rotation game's strong right there. It's like you're turning a doorknob and you just stretch your fingers out so that it's no longer just like the doorknob here, but it's the entire thing. So it's like the point of rotation is straight down the middle of your arm. But like this is how you do all tremolos, this is how you do like these sorts of tremolo-ish motions as well. Ooh, I really like this. Like the stillness that this creates. Ooh, and that was good. This is now conversational, right? Because it drops to a lower octave. Two voices are carrying a conversation, but you expect, right, to hear a very strong crescendo here. But instead, both his playing, right, and the arrangement thin out. And so it creates this contrast between your expectation as a listener and what actually happens in the music. Very soft. Fascinating. So I think ANIMENZ'S says in this section, he calls it forehand technique. The right hand carries two lines, right? Right, and then you got the... Right, so there's two melodies, two lines that are going in the right hand, and then you also have one line going in the left, but it's like vacillating between like two motions, so I guess it's arguable that it's four. But this is obviously very delicate because everything is happening within a piano dynamic, and so the way that it has to be phrased has to be very delicate as well. Right, okay, so it's like a build into decrescendo. Okay, see how closely his hands are sticking to the keys? And how he's utilizing pedal, right? As he's jumping onto the thumb, there's a little bit of rotation that goes onto the thumb to make it heavier, to make it stronger. Second, look at how close the fingers are to the keys on the top voice for the right hand. He's sticking very close to the keys so that they don't have a chance of overpowering the thumb, but also playing relatively flat so that he's able to connect them. And so because there's a contrast, your ear can pick that up. The pedaling is very dry. Dry pedal enables you to be able to hear all the textural differences so that the difference in layers isn't only coming from dynamics, but it's also coming from articulation and textures. And so, again, pedaling too much mushes the texture a lot. You can work texture through the muddy pedal, but like, why don't you just take that out, right? You might as well just take it out or reduce it some and let the textures come through to do a lot of that voicing for you. And of course, right, the other thing to note before you start hitting me up in the comments and say, look how long he's holding the pedal, this is also helped by the fact that the arrangement is moved up a few octaves. Things that are higher up have a tendency to muddy the pedal less. The strings don't vibrate for as long, the sound doesn't linger as long. Right, very, very cute, passing the main melody into the top voice for a split second. And here we get a lot more weight going into the keys. It's a little bit hard to tell how much weight, right? Because we're not seeing a lot of body movement forward because of the camera angle. Because a lot of weight is driven from the, you know... Oh, but there it is. Yeah. And you get this sort of like gluey, like heavy feeling by arm weight. And so all this is coming from the arm going into keys at like almost like a 45-degree-ish angle. And of course he lifts slightly, right, for the runs. Ooh, that's very nice. The fading out, right? Like almost like an echo. The motif is being recalled, right? The motifs are being recalled again. Slightly syncopated, right, on the weak beat, moving on to F sharp. Ooh, and ending in a major chord instead of a minor one, like the original does. Fascinating. Yeah, this echo sort of thing, there's two ways of going about doing this, right? You can have each note actually like decrescendo on the way down, or you can keep them at a similar dynamic, and every once in a while, one of them you kick back up. Right? Again, notice how close his fingers are sticking to the keys. And he's still voicing. And look, the connect, right? Connecting each and every single note is so, like in classical music, when you have slurs like this, you have to connect every single one of them, right? You have to, right? Because it creates a different texture, it creates a different sound. With something like this, in order to connect the next one, you shift your fingers, right? While holding down the keys so that you don't press it down again, and then you're able to connect, right, the next notes, which is what ANIMENZ'S is doing. Yes, you love to hear that. Ritardando. But I think it's pretty interesting listening to this, right? After listening to so much new animens, because it's like there's less of these like big sweeping movements, even in the left and the right hand, right? To give it that what he calls the more orchestral feel. But the right hand, again, very interesting that the voicing back here is a lot louder, right? The main melody than everything else. Whereas nowadays it is a little bit more subtle. And so this was very fun. This is a lot of fun listening to it. I really enjoyed it, and I hope you got something out of it too. Alright, and that about does it for this video. I hope that it was interesting to you, and that my analysis at least shed some light on what's going on when ANIMENZ'S is performing this piece. It makes me wonder where my sound will be in a few years and how I'll think of my own playing now. But anyways, if you enjoyed the video, please like, comment, and subscribe. And if you would like to support the channel and help me continue making content like this, you can do so via Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can also get WattKeys merch. Links for all those are down in the description below. And if you would like to hear me analyze more playing, you should click right here. Or if you would like to hear me play, you should click right here. Be sure to catch my streams on Saturdays, where I do a lot of this analysis live, except on your videos to help you guys out. And until next time, peace.